Okay, good morning, everybody. We're going to pick up in the middle of Daf Samach Tes Amud Beis. Mitzvah Hashem get towards the end of Daf Ayin Vav Amud Beis. So last week we were discussing the Mishnah regarding Melika, the Nimtzis Treifa. A person does Melika, and it came out of Treifa. We saw it's Machlaikis in the Mishnah and Samach Tes. Rameir and Yehuda, if it's Mitame by the base of Blia or not. Rameir wanted to say it's not Mitame by the base of Blia. However, Rabbi Yehuda said it was Mitame, that Melika does not help by a Treifa, and therefore it's Mitame. So we discussed Rameir Shita regarding does he hold a Kavachayim and Nish Kavachayim. We said he's coming from the pasuk of the Zois Tayras Habeim of Ha'if. So now we're going to pick up what is Takab Shat in Shitas Rabbi Yehuda that says that Melika does not help by a Treifa. So it's towards the middle. It's by the middle of the Amid going towards the bottom. Rabbi Yehuda, my time. What is Takab Shat in Rabbi Yehuda to say that Melika doesn't help? They bring down from the guys that Omer Rabba was talking, because we're going to see in a moment, the Shizvi tells Rabba back. So Rabba's talking, he says as follows: Kra Ashkach Vikadarash. Rabbi Yehuda is actually coming from a pasuk that he finds we're talking about the Oifis. The Oifis at the Hiris, the kosher birds, where it talks about what does the pasuk say? It says this is the Makar for Tumas Beis Abliya. It says in the pasuk, V'chol nefesh asher toichal nevela utreifa. Be'ezechu began, a person comes tamei, v'tamed ar v'tahar. So we're going to be discussing for quite a while these psukim of Nevela Treifos. This is the pasuk of Vayikra Yud Zayin. We're going to keep on giving references, Vayikra Yud Zayin, Vayikra Chavez. This is the pasuk of Vayikra Yud Zayin to the Mekar, where it says in the pasuk regarding Tumas Beis Abliya, it says Nevela and Utreifa. So Zokta Yehuda as follows: Amar Yehuda, Treifa Lamanemra. Why in the world does it say Treifa? In Treifa is Chaya. If you tell me the halacha is a regular Treifa till he dies, it's considered a regular animal. Then when he dies, is what? It's a nevela. So for Rabbi Yehuda, Harei nevela amura, and in treifa ein echayo, Harei bechlal nevela. So why do we have to say treifa and nevela inside the pasuk? Ella, the reason why it says treifa lahavi treifa sheshachta shemitama, and this is shitas Rabbi Yehuda to tell us that melika does not help by a treifa. So on that of Shizvi, I'm going to have Shizvi back to Rabbah. Ella ma'ato, if you're going with this concept, whatever it says nevela treifa, this type of concept, that it's extra and it's miyusser. Why does it say Nevela Treifa to tell us that Treifa is Eina Matame? Elamat D'chsev, this is the pasuk regarding by the Chelev, by Chelev Nevela to tell us it's not, doesn't have Tumas Nevela. What is the pasuk there over this? What's the pasuk say over there? This is the Yikar Zayin. It says V'lechelev Nevela V'chelev Treifa Ye'asel L'cha Malacha. So the pasuk explicitly tells us Ye'asel L'cha Malacha that it's not Matame. Then it says V'achol Sechlu, however you cannot eat it. So Zokt Shizvi to Rabbah. If you're going with this understanding, by the pasuk of Chelev Nevela, it says over there also the pasuk V'chelev Nevela V'chelev Treifa. Hasam Nami, you can also have the same mahalach of Neima Im Treifa Chaya Harei Nevela Amura Im Treifa Ein Chaya Harei Bechlal Nevela. So why in the world does it say both? Elohavi. You're going to tell me the Treifa Sheshachta. If a person that has a Treifa and did a Shchita, that the Chalba, the Chelev is tar. The problem is Mechlal, that the basar itself, the basar is tamei. Mechlal di tamei metama. And the problem with that is, V'amar Rabbi Yehuda Merav, Amri Lov Masnisa Tana. It says in the pasuk, V'chiyamus min ha-behema. We're learning from the extra min to tell us mixes behema metama. And there's mixes behema and metama. Ve'ezizu. This is zu treifa sheshachta. So Ella Zaktimara rather is learning Chayla Treifa Mivaila Lemute Tmeya to tell us that what by a non-kosher species the Mish Yesh Ben Mina. What's Ben Mina means a kosher animal Treifa. Yatzizu Shein Ben Mina Treifa. So the question is Achanami. If so, just like Mechela and Avela, Vechela Treifa, we're using Treifa to tell us Mina, etc. Say the same thing by the Oifos Achanami Lemute Taimei Shein Ben Mina Treifa. So this is the question, why are we saying Treifa? And that the Gemara answers, rather, Oif, Tamei, Rabbi Yehuda, rather, where is Rabbi Yehuda learning this this concept of Oif Tamei? He's learning it from a different pasuk, Minavela Nafkale. Where's this pasuk of Nevela from a different pasuk of Nevela? The Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Aimer, Yachol Tehei Nevela, Sa'oif, Tamei, Mitame, Begadim, Abeis Abliya. Zok Rabbi Yehuda, you would think that what? That Nevela Sa'oif is Mitame. Tamalaima, it says in the pasuk, this is the pasuk that we're saying. We're going to give a reference. This is the pasuk of Vayikra Chavez. This is not Vayikra Yud Zayin where we have in the pasuk V'chol Nefesh Shatoichal Nevela Treifa. Rather, there's another pasuk. Vayikra Chavez says very clearly Nevela Utreifa Lo Yaichal L'Tavavani Hashem. So again, we're learning from the extra Miyusa Nevela Treifa Lo Yaichal to tell us Mishe Surah Mishum Bal Toichal, so as it's Zevachim Nevela. Yotze says, Scheiner Surah Mishum Bal Toichal, Nevela El Mishum. What is Taka this? There's nothing to do with Nevela Mishum, Bal Toichal Tomei. Umemela comes out according to Yehuda. What do we have? We have the extra treifa. The originally where we started is miyuser. What is that coming to teach us? The treifa is coming to teach us that malika does not help by a treifa. Zok Gemara weiter. We're on the top of Ayin and Aleph. By the chaylev tmeya l'chayir for Gemara we should have the same thing. Hi nami teipuk le. You learn by the chaylev tmeya. You should learn that it's metame. Why? For the pasuk of the Yikra Zayin. It says, V'chelev nevela v'chelev treifa ye'asu l'cha malacha. This is the pasuk of what? The chelev is nishmetame. So frankly, Mahainami tepilim v'chelev nevela to tell us, me, she'isura mishum bal toichal chelev nevela, yotzizu. This is what I mean, yotzizu by the tmeya. She'in isura mishum bal toichal chelev nevela ela mishum. Rather the pasuk of what? Of Tomei. The pasuk where it clearly says, bal toichal like we saw earlier. Elahai treifa, Zaktamar, you're right. Rather, what is the treifa coming to for? Elahai treifa mivayla suye chaya. A kosher dekachaya, for example, is a tzvi, a deer. That what? Sal kadai techamina. Comes the pasuk to tell us that what? By a tzvi, that the chelev is not mitame. Sal kadai techamina. Mi shechel ba'aser. Ubesara mutter. Dafkin animal. The chelev itself is aser. But what? The basar is mutter. Yotzizu. Shechalbo b'sara mutter by kosher dekachai doesn't make a difference regarding the chel of the basar. If it's both mutter or both aser, and that was saying kamash malon that the chel is nishmetame by a tzvi v'chadayim any kosher dekachai. Okay, Amalei they take out over here in that guy is Amalei from the Chitin Gumetzes. Rashi didn't even have it. But the question is, Ma'ishno tmeya the ein chel b'choluk mibesara. So we're telling us the question is, what's the difference by Tmeya? That you're telling us the loy nafkalon zok Rashi leitar chelba. You're learning from the pasuk. They tell us that we're not going to learn chela this tar. They ain't chelba choluk b'sara. So frak the Gemara ma'ishna Tmeya they ain't chelba choluk b'sara. So too chayanami ain't chelba choluk b'sara fi surah. And therefore you can't read the pasuk of achalei sichlu. V'ai the Siv says inside the pasuk v'achalei sichlu. We're going to see this later in Yetzer Hashem. Regarding this is talking about the chelev and the chai tahira. So elamar baya taka treifa by chelev is lugufei it's dreich. You needed to tell us that by chelev by treifa is what? That it's not metame. What would you think that it's taka metame? Shaloi timer don't say ho yulvitmei asur is mechayim. The treifa is also asur mechayim. That's what we're seeing already on Samach Tasam Beis. The concept that a treifa is ready asur. Mechaim, whether it means dafka, a piece of the animal, but the point is it's a treifa already has, it's the whole concept, otherwise it's an avela, that it's treifa is a surah mechaim, and ma tmeyo chal b'tomei, so too, av treifa chal b'tomei. And that the Gemara is daicha, if this is really true, you have the same thing, what? By the oifas. Now what are we talking about by the oifas? By the treifas oifas. By in a scenario where it's a treifa. Hi nami mivay shalai tamei. You should say the same thing. Hoil v'oif tamei. It's also b'achila v'treifas. Also b'achila ma'av tamei and matame. So to l'chay we should say after treifa is ein matame. And that we're saying kamash more than what? That the treifa taka is matame. And basically, v'oid mikol meila treifa mitmeya. Can you really compare a treifa tmeya? Let's be real. The whole concept of treifa on a simple level is that it used to be a valid animal, it got a defect, it's not going to live 12 months, one of the 70 simonim that it's not going to live. But the point is, a treifa, the chit, you're going to tell me, treifa mi beten, the hainu never had shasa kosher, was always considered a treifa. Make the meimar, I'll tell you, nice, b'mina mi'aika. You're right, there is such a thing as an animal that's a treifa mi beten. But the concept of treifa is usually shasa kosher. Ela merava hatayra amra yava isin avela v'yachla l'sechelev. The whole concept we're trying to say over here is, you know what's taka pshat and Yehuda that by treifa by chelev, and why it's not extra? Because you know why it's coming to tell us chelev and the chelev treifa and nevela to tell us yava isin avela after it says treifa, then it says nevela again v'yachla l'sechelev. Now this is tafka l'shitas Rabbi Yehuda. Think of Shittas Rabbi Yehuda is ain't a sechal listen. We're not going to the other Shittas. I think it's for Meir. But the concept over here is usually you Rabbi Yehuda hold ain't a sechal listen. No such thing as a double isser. Once you usser something, you can't add another isser. Kamash on the pasuk that Yavoi Isser Chalev Yavoi Isser Nevela, and it should be also, even though it's already a Chalev, it should be also Nevela and Yavoi Isser Treifa, both ways V'yachol al Isser Chalev. Now, why do I need both? Why do I need Nevela and Treifa? One of them is ready miyusha to teach us Isser Chal Isser. Zakdamaru tzrich I need Nevela and Treifa diish mi Nevela. I'll tell you, why Nevela helps for Isser mishum demitamya. Ava Treifa, I'll tell you, Emeloi. Maybe Treifa ain't Isser Chal Isser. Kamash on the pasuk Nevela Treifa. Diish mi Treifa mishum disur mechayim. That's the whole chiddush of Treifa. You can already have it when the animal's still alive. Meshenke Nevela. Nevela is dafka when the animal dies. We need it both. V'chela nevela, v'chela treifa to tell us both halachas. Ein isser chal isser. Usually, kamashman over here, the isser nevela will happen also in the isser chalev. So we're coming out tackle l'shitas of Yehuda. You ended up with what? The treifa is miyusher to teach us the malika does not help by a treifa. Now we're going to go jump back into Rameir. Rameir, frektig mo. Okay, you had Rameir. Rameir holds malika does help. We saw already for the pasuk zois. Tairas habeim of a oif. That's where we ended up last week. Shiur. This concept, or Meir holds Milika does help to tell us Misha Shava, which is going to be the oifus. So Zokting Marva Meir hi Treifa, where it says in the pasuk. Again, this is Vayikri Yadzayin. We're going to keep making references. Vayikri Yadzayin, Vayikri Chabeis. Vayikri Yadzayin says V'chol nefesh eshotoichal. Toichal we're going to see is lashon achila, means a kazayis, but it says clearly eshotoichal. Nevelu Treifa. This is the makar, like we said earlier. This is the makar for Tumas Beis Abliya. So Vayikru Yadzayin is always the Mikar. And then we have Vayikru Chabeis, Nevelu Treifa, Lo Yoicha. So Zok the Mar, V'ameh Hai Treifa, the Treifa, you see clearly from Torah, V'ameh Hai Treifa, my Avalei. What he's talking to do from Vayikru Yadzayin. You, Reb Yehuda, you learn Treifa, come to tell us that it's Miyusah that what? The Malika doesn't help, but you, Rameir, you hold Malika does help. The Mar answers, Midvayele for something else. The Muti Shchita, Shehi Lefnim. The chiddush is when a person does a shchita inside that it's not metame. The base of Bliya, this is really the sugya earlier, where we ended last week, Samad Aleph, we saw that ma treifa sheshav v'nim uchutz, it has to come tell us that it's not metame by the base of Bliya. So Rabbi Yehuda, now we're going to keep it going back and forth. Whatever we say for a mayor, you need it for a Yehuda. Whatever you say for a Yehuda, you need it for a mayor. For Rabbi Yehuda, how does Rabbi Yehuda know this from? Treifa achrinik. He's coming from the other pasuk, Vayikra. It's coming from Rabbi Yehuda, from Rabbi Yehuda's pasuk Avat. Rabbi Yehuda Treifa achrinik siv. It says inside the pasuk Nevelo Treifa laYochel l'Tama B'ni Hashem. Rameir. What is Rameir going to do? Takin Echanami comes out. There's two psukim. There's Vayikra Chabeis Vayikra Zayin. Rameir Chad l'Muti. Yes, you know why there's two psukim. Chad l'Muti Shchita Shilfneim. V'Chad l'Muti. If Tommy that it's not Matam Beisabliya. Frekting Mara. So where does Rabbi Yehuda know if Tommy? Rabbi Yehuda. So Mara answers Nevela and Afkalei. He learns inside the pasuk. It says Nevela Treifa laYochel. Where is this? Vayikra Chabeis. Rameir. If so, what's Rameir that's arguing Hai Nevela Me'avalei? So you know what it needs this from? L'shir achila b'kazayis. Frektimara v'teipeklei from the pasuk of Vayikri Yadzayin. It says Ashatoicha, which is lashon achila. V'teipeklei mikra kama med after achmana b'lashon achila. More answers. Chalashur achila b'kazayis. Yes, Vayikri Yadzayin comes tell us the achila b'kazayis. V'chalashur achila b'nei achilas pras. We'll know whether it's 9 minutes, whatever the shiur mar. Again, Yom Kippur, the point is, when a person schleps too long, I think Achilas Pras on a simple level, as long as it takes a half a loaf of bread, but the point is even minutes. Then if a person schleps, it's not considered Achila. And therefore, yes, Achilas Pras, Nami Shados, even if you schlep it out, Kamashmon, it's only also the Achila if you waited, Kadei, Achilas Pras. So we said inside the Pasuk, earlier, v'chel of nevela, v'chel of treifa, that's not metame, but v'chel of nevela, and then it says, ya'aseh l'chol melacha, v'achol lo yisichlu. So Zok the Gemara as follows. B'chelev behema Torah, katzim medaber. When it says, v'chel of nevela, v'chel of treifa, what are we talking about? The behema Torah or tmei? We're going to see, we could go both, stadim, and we're going to come out with the pasuk to teach us one way. V'chelev nevela, v'chel of treifa. Now, the Gemara right away starts off by saying, what is the pasuk talking about? A behema Torah. Zok Gemara. Maybe and Amarton, what would be the argument? Tiher mechlal shchuta v'tir mechlal chelev. We have the concept. The whole point is we all know that if a person has an animal, you can't eat an animal, right? Without doing what? Ma'aseh shchita. So come shchita is mitar, and it's also v'tir mechlal chaylev. Zok Rashi bitam chaylev tirs and avela. We all know militame because it says the chaylev and avela is tar. So you have both ways. So here you could go with what? With the behemoth tmeya. Ma kashetir mechlal shchuta is b'tar v'lebitmeya. So this is the way of going tar. Af kashetir mechlal chaylev b'tar v'lebitmeya. So this is one direction. Oh, iklach l'derchu and says follows. Tir mechlal nevela, v'tir mechlal chaylev, and makashet tir mechlal nevela. What are we referring to as b'tmei b'lei b'tayra? So say the same thing. Af kashet tir mechlal chaylev, like we said earlier, is dafka b'tmei b'lei b'tayra. Amarta, now we're saying kishaba one einam base, kishaba b'derchu, kishaba b'derchu itayra, kishaba b'derchu itmei. It depends which way you're going. We don't really have a direction. Go the first cheshbon the way we went, which is dafka tayra. Shenka, the second cheshbon was working with tmeya. Tama loymar, and that we say, and it says in the pasuk, v'chelu nevelo, v'yikor zayin, v'chelu treifa, yasel chamalacha. Treifa to tell us, mishi yesh b'mina. Treifa, therefore, it's a tmeya. Shein b'mina treifa, v'loi it's a chaya. Zok the more by the v'loi it's a chaya, shesh b'mina treifa. Tama loymar, this is the end of the pasuk, where it says, v'achal esichlu, to tell us, mishi chalba aser b'sar mutter, yatsa chaya. Like we learned earlier, shechalba b'sar mutter. And therefore, the chaylev by behemoth tayra is mitami. Amalei Rav Yaakov barabel Rava. Elamato nevelas behemoth tayra. We're going. This is a kasha in the Mishnah. We said earlier. What did we say? Makashetir mechlal nevel betmeya. Makashetir mechlal nevela. What are we talking about? Dafka behemoth temeya nisha tayra. So Amalei Rav Yaakov barabel Rava. Elamato nevelas behemoth tayra. Dafka is mitama. But nevelos behemoth tmei loy mitama, that can be. The Gemara is clearly, it's Gemara chulin meferish, that the behemoth of nevelos behemoth tmei is mitama. Amalei, you're making such a mistake. We're not talking about bechlal behemoths. Kama sabi shibashtuba. There's so many. Oh, like Zok Rashi skating merubim shekamayischem. Such older people, you should understand already. How do you make such a mistake? We're not talking about behemoths. I guess a lot of skating were complaining with the exact same taina. The l'chayr should come out that a nevela of a behemoth tmei is nishmatama. And we know meferish, I guess everyone knew the Gemara is throughout Chas, that a nevela behemoth tmei is mitame. Rather, Amalei, what are we talking about? Kamasalah should be seifa. You know what we're discussing? Avada, we're not discussing the behemoth tmei. That avada is tame. Rather, seifa ason lenevelas oif tame. And avada by oifos, that what? Clearly, it's the whole pasuk that it's mitaher from L'tumba beis habliya. We don't say by oif that a person's tamei in beis habliya. Omar Rabbi Yochanan loitir rameir. So this whole concept of rameir, we all know the malika helps. Now we're going to see a machlokes. Is it dafka by a tmimim or even by a balmom zok rameir? If a person does a malika, it's going to help that it's not mitame by the beis habliya. Omar Rabbi Yochanan loitir rameir dafka lebetmimim. Dafka, an animal doesn't have a mum. Aval balamumin loy. Rebbe Lazar Amad, or Meir is going to hold this is Shita Rebbe Lazar filu bebale mumin. Itmanami Amar Biba Amar Lazar Mitayr Meir bebale mumin vafilu avazim v'tanagaylim. So very clearly, even by avazim are geese v'tanagaylim, and the whole concept of avazim b'chlal, you don't put in them as bad geese. It's not royal carbon whatsoever. And Alpha Pikain, it's going to help in Malika that a person is not over Tumma Beis Habliya. Based on this understanding, Araf Eis Mao. So we all know by the Egla Rufa, you don't use a goat, rather use a calf. Here, what did this person do? He did an Egla Rufa instead of doing Egla, that's literally the Lashon Egla Rufa, he did an Eza Rufa. He didn't use the Egla Rufa. Instead, Egla Rufa. So instead of using the calf, he used the goat. What is the halacha? Do we say avazin? So what's the shiloh? Do we say this is the shiloh? Now the whole shiloh would be is l'shitas rameir. You rameir, they're saying that avazin by geese it helps. So maybe we'll say the same thing by egla ace instead of not egla rufa, ace a rufa. Now avazin then a grand time reminded me no. Let's be real. Daifis ninu aval ace la mina de egla. Why? Because one's a behemah gasa, which is the A's, and one's a behemah daka, we consider separate meaning. Yes, about the behemah daka, behemah gas. But let's be real, everyone agrees that a goat and a calf are the exact same animal, they're in the parsha of the animals. So Yosef Rabdimi v'Karmela Shmeitza and Amalei Abayo Michlal. The whole shaila is of a Eis Arufa. Michlal the Egla Arufa is Tairi because you don't even have a shaila by Egla Arufa. So Amalei yes in Amri the Beir Bianai. You know why Egla Arufa helps? Kapara Ksiba Kikachim to tell us that it helps. Like it says in the Pasuk regarding Egla Arufa, Kapar La'amchi Sol Seinach Namitz Kapara, and it's going to help. Meishav Nasan Avodah Darvua by Nasan says in the pasuk. Va'achol. This is the final words of the pasuk. Va'yikr Zayin. Va'achol lo'isichlu. You should not eat it. Ein li'elech chel shasar b'chila matabana. What about chel shashar haniskol over here? It says ve'egla arufa. That's the whole point why we're mentioning this. Minayin tamalayma kol chelav. Now, for acting maravi sakataitech egla arufa tairi. It will come out he taira. Is that really true? That itself is tar. V'chalva is tamei. And that the Gemara answers here right. It's pashut that ataka in the is no shayla that the chelav is tar. So where's the shayla? Ki itztecha hecha the shachta mishchat. In a scenario where a person shachted it, like we're going to see that already, but egel roof is a chiddush that it's what the mechayim while it's alive, it's ready neseres. On that the Gemara is going to bother with. We're talking about a scenario where it died. You're talking about a scenario that died. Michlal, again, this is talking about by the Egla Arufa. Michlal, the Mechayim Asura, because that makes sense. Even though there's no Arufa Dantit. Zaktamar, yes. By the Egla Arufa, it becomes also even before the mice are throwing it down in Rabbiana, Gvul Shematim Shechachti. Ataka, the Gvul, we're Maimasai. Rashi, when is Taka the limit? When is that point where it becomes already Asur? And my friends reminded me, and they told me to say as follows: that a second it goes down the nachal, and it comes out taka that it's a surah mechayim hajanaloch chatas ahoif hajanaloch. Okay, now we're going to discuss a fascinating parak, the 8th parak in Zevachim, where it's very complicated. It talks many. This is the parak of Taruvais. We're going to discuss Roy, Valtu called the Parish, move the Parish, a lot of heavy sugyas called Kavur, Kamechsamechsadami, all the concepts of Roy. Zok the Mishnah, let's jump right into it. Kol hazochim shenesharvu bechatos amesis. What is the scenario of chatos amesis? Rashi says the 5 cases. Zok Rashi, one is the Vlada chatos. That's one case. We have chatos amesis. Zok Rashi bechatos amesis ba'aleo. Vitmura chatos. And the 4th case is you lost it, so you did it already, and then you found it. And the 5th case is nimtzes balmup. All those cases are chatas hamesis. Oy b'shar niskol zaktim mara afilu achas beribaya. I'm going to question this lashon afilu achas beribaya. Even if 1 in 10,000. So on a simple level means we're going to see even lashon afilu. Let's go with the Gemara. On a simple level is a person has one animal that's tamei, and he has 10,000 animals that are tahar. And the animal that's tamei went into that 10,000 animals that are tar. Everything becomes possible. We're going to discuss this extensively. It's daf kisur and no, even when it's not asur no, everything becomes asur. And what should Yitaka do? Look, the Mishnah over here, you have a takanta. You have a takana. The yemusu kula on afilach berba yemusu kula. Sorry, in such a case, what is the halacha? They all got to die. Now, what is the halacha? Nisarvu b'shor shenevda boy avera. You have a Zevachim that are kosher, and it got mixed up with the shar. Shenevda boyaver. They take out the oik because they're learning it. Kigoin shehemis es adam a piedachad. Usually, we all know if avad if it would have a pishnei meidem, you'd kill it. But we're talking about a piedachad, and we all know the sugya of moed beknas is potter. Shehemis adam a piedachad. Oy al pia bailim. That the bailim were moed. Whatever it is, there it's moed beknas potter. But the point is, you cannot kill the shar. Or Nerva, whether the animal did reveal to a person, or a person did reveal to the animal, or it's been muksa. Muksa doesn't mean Shabbos. Muksa means muksa la b'dezorah. This is really the pasuk we learned earlier. Mina behema is lahaitzi all these things. Mina behema lahaitzi reveil nerva. Mina bakus and ava. Mina tzayin to muksa. Mina tzayin lahaitzi to negach. But the point is, all these cases, what is the second scenario where it's not asur b'nerva nerva b'muksa? Whether avodah zarah, v'neva, there was mamash neva avodah zarah, the esnan zayna, in the scenario mechir kelev, you bought a dog with it, Bekalayim, or an ayin aleph on the base, top of the almond. Whether it's kalayim, what is the case of kalayim? It's with the goat and a sheep. So it's a behavior that's kalayim. Or betreifa, animal that's going to die. B'yaitze daifin, the psukim tell us clearly that it's not kosher, Yitzidaf in a C-section. Yiru, all those cases, this is the second case where it's not asabano. The first cases were asabano, which is what? The chantes ameis shar niskul. Here, a dechad, revev, and irvav chule, it's not asabano, just also to put on the mizbeach. So what do? You have a patent. Yiru, achi, stavu, you wait till it gets about. Be machrin, you redeem it, you sell it. And now, the yavi b'dmei yafa shebehen ma'oisamin. So we're talking about we have a suffix. Now, in those animals, one of the animals, a few of the animals, the point is, there were different prices. Now, you're not sure which animal got lost. You got to go what? Extreme. You got to go and spend the highest price. What is the halacha? In a simple level, you have an animal, a carbon, and it got mixed up with chulin. So you sell it. For whatever you need to sell it, like that, it's automatically considered part of the karbanos. Which we're going to discuss in the Gemara. On a simple level, the kain, again, you have behema, ruvain, and a behema shel shimon, they're both chatas. So what does the kain do? We're going to discuss the kain needs smicha. We're going to go through that sugya, but on a simple level, the kain should decide this animal should go to ruvain, this animal should go to shimon, and it's good. For example, oil and a shomim. So then you have an issue. She's achru, and again, the yav with my yav shebehem means that. With my yav shebehem means that. The yav shebehem means that. So in such a case, you got to go to chumrah, both in the oila, both in the shlomim, and each one you got to spend $10,000 instead of 5. So you're missing a gap. What do? You got to pay from your own pocket. Nisarvu bibechar ubemaiser. This is a scenario we're talking about Zevachim. For example, oila got mixed up. Oila b'bechar b'maiser behema. So we're going to discuss. We're going to see in the Gemara that bechar and maiser have fascinating halachas. Dafka by bechar. Yeah, you can be bevazid. You don't sell it with the litra. All these cases, maiser dafka Yerushalayim. So what do you do? Nisarva bechar maiser yirad shistavu v'yachlu kebechar chamaiser and a kol yichayil nisarv chutz menachates v'ashim. We're going to discuss. Rashi says the Gemara discuss. One's a zachar, one's in a keva. We'll get there in Yetzer Hashem. Zok the Gemara. My afilu. It's pashut. What's the lashon afilu? Understanding that we're talking about the roiv was tummy. And that the Gemara says no. Hachi kamar kol azvachim shenesaru behen bechatos amesus. We're talking about a zvachim, a kosher animal. They got mixed up with what? Bechatos amesus oishar niskol afilu achs b'ribayas. You have one kosher animal. 10,000. One tamer animal. 10,000 tahiras. They're all gone. Afilu achar b'ribayas musakula. Fact the Gemara. Okay, we have a beautiful Mishnah that tells us quite a few halachas. Isur Aina, where it's not asabana, the Revev Benerva, and then we shall kachim b'kachim. But for the Gemara, we already have another Mishnah that teaches this halacha. Tanina chada zimna. This is a Mishnah in Tmura. The Mishnah tells us kol ha'asur in the gam mizbeach. In oisim b'chal shein, the hainu it's never bottled, and it clearly says Revev Benerva. So for the Gemara, simple question: why in the world do we need to say another halacha? We already have the Mishnah in Tmura that taught us that it's not bottle, etc. On that time, Rav Asher, you know why? If you would only have the Mishnah in Tmura, there you have to understand. There's two concepts. There's two chidushim at bittul. One is the gavoya. The gavoya is that we have 10,000 animals. One of them is a tummy. So the Rebbeinu Shalom Kilo doesn't want what? Doesn't want your chas v'shalom. It's possible it's a tummy. So Rebbeinu Shalom doesn't want it. So we're much more machmer. So we have no choice but to get rid of all that. So gavoya in a way could be much more chumrah, which we're going to see in a moment. Could be much more chumrah than a hedyet. The hedyet is nu. But then you have the other way around. We're going to not have the Bais Medrash to lose. We don't want the Bais Medrash to lose. The hedyet we can understand to lose. So you have both stadim, which we're going to see right now. On that we're saying as follows. If you would only have the Mishnah in Tmura, which says everything is asur, it's most of the Rebbeinu Shalom. Avela hedyet, maybe for a person. No, aim alay. Kamashma Mishnah that it's not bought. And just say our Mishnah. I'll tell you the other way around. Something that's so bad where it's also about no, we could understand. It's so chomer that it could do the damage and make everything else bottle. So again, you have two ways to look at it. You can look at it if it's a surah, no, it means it's so gefahrlich. It's such a strong poison that could damage the rest. If so, why do you need the Mishnah Tmura for the second case? The scenario where it's not us, we have our Mishnah. It doesn't say exactly the shear of batel. Kol shehein asim tani. Over there it says the shear. So why in the world does our Mishnah say it? We already have the Mishnah tomorrow. The more answers you right. It's only for the takana. Our Mishnah says a chiddush. But we need it for takana. Takanta, it's tichlei. Gemara, the head nami. We also have a Mishnah. Rashi says it's Maseches of the Zara. It's not the one at Tamura. It's rather the Zara. The Hadyot, Nami, Tonale, Ve'elu, Asurin, Ve'oisrin, Ve'chol Shehein. It clearly says it's not batel anything. Yai Nesach, Ve'avoidus Kechavim. So what do you need our Mishnah to tell us by the Chattis HaMeses V'shorin? This goes like the Gemara. You need both. You need the Gemara by the Zohar and you need our Mishnah. We're on the top of Ayin Beis Amud Aleph Tzrichi. If you only have the Gemara by the Zohar, I'll tell you Shkoyach. What are we discussing over there? We're talking about Yai Nesach, Ve'avoidus Kechavim. We're talking about a regular person. Which is chulin on a simple level. Having a chulin, they change it, but the point is chulin hadyet. Our Mishnah is discussing the gavaya. Rabban Shlomo doesn't want it, maybe not. The other way around. You can't lose out just because there's a suffix. Just say the Mishnah of us. Having been on the Mikdash in the mice. Have a chulin the mice. Amei sur. Another battle of Beruba. Kamash one our Mishnah. Tzrichi Kamash one our Mishnah. Very clearly that what that it's not batel. So again, we have our Mishnah clearly tells us that what. That it's not batel. Don't think they're bunch of, we're going to lose out a few dollars. So we should say it's batel kamashmo nish. We have the Gemara and Avodah Zarah. What's the Gemara? Avodah Zarah coming to tell us that even though it's what? Even though it's a hadyet, that's you think maybe dafka by chulin, dafka by our Mishnah where it's ma'us. So we don't want it. Maybe the Gemara and Avodah Zarah is talking about chulin, where it's talking about a regular person. You could say the concept of batel. Kamash malon, the Gemara and Avodah Zarah, even for hadyet, it does not work. So Gemara, Taka, what is Taka Pshat? Now we got to discuss the Sugya Raif. We all know, Achirab Mahatais, we always have the concept of Raif. Everyone agrees when something's very chashiv, it's not batel. Which we're going to discuss on Amud Beis. Now we have to know one concept. By behema is something, everyone agrees as follows. Everyone agrees a diamond, something that no one ever throws into a package, it's a davar fnei atzma, it's very expensive, it's not batel. Everyone agrees, seed, something, you buy a pallet of potatoes, they'll throw a few more potatoes in it. Everyone agrees it is batel. There's always the two extremes that there's no machlek, there's no shayla. Where it becomes a little confusing, a little sticky, is dafka scenario where, yes, it might be typical to throw it in the package, but usually people are makbid, or the other way around. It's typical to be makbid, but sometimes people throw it in the package. Where is that? Such a case will be dafka a behema. We also have the shayla about behema. Behema is not black and white. So now, what is it depending on? We're going to see in Amud Beis. Is it have to be typically, usually, a person does not throw it, so it's chashiv? Or S means 100% like the diamonds, where it's something that's so obvious that everyone agrees that you don't throw it in the bundle, you don't throw it in the package. There, everyone agrees it's not chashiv. So now there, since we're discussing a behema, where it's not so simple, it's actually machlekes in Amud Beis. So for Gemara, where it's typical, we can understand, kol shedak l'mana sheninu, and therefore it's not batel. L'man da'amar S, it's only not batel where it's 100% you makbid. We're talking about a behema. Everyone agrees behema, not everyone's makbid. What is the sugya? It's not. Tilson's fenugreek. So you had chavilin. Simple level chavila is a bundle. How much is the bundle? They bring down. Stafka, a bundle of 25 makes it a davar chashuv. You have 25 stalks in the bundle. Everyone agrees it's a davar chashuv. Now we're talking about tilson. So Rashi, we're talking about a spice, mina tavlin, and it's a bundle. Why is it so chashuv? Because even the tama eats, even the root has the same time as the rest of the stalk. So it's a very chashuv plant. So someone who had this chashuv plant, shall kill a carrot. So it's kalayim. What do you do in such a case? Now it's a davar chashuv. Amud Beis, Yidalku. You got to burn it because it says the puzzle very clearly. It's kalayim. You got to burn it. What happens? You have this bundle and it got mixed up with a different bundle. It's a big shayla. If you need that b'acherim, the point is cool and Yidalku divrei meir holds doesn't make a difference even if it's b'acherim. It got mixed up. It's still going to be what machmir, and we got to burn it. No. It's batel. Yalabech the Messiah. We all know Kalayim. It's 201. We saw this in the beginning. I think in the beginning of a comma maybe it was. But the point is Kalayim is batel in the beginning. With 201. Kol. This is the machlekes. Kol shedarkali manois mekadesh. In a scenario where it's called darkali manos means you can't decision, it's mekadesh. Chamaim no kadesh. Dafkal shisha dvarim bavad. Kiva aimer no even another one shiva. Beilait. What are the things that are very chashuv? A guy's a ferach is a shemakim. The reminder from Badan was also shemakim. Vechaviyah is tumais, and a barrel where it's closed, so the smell and the taste, the rech and the tam, doesn't dissipate. It doesn't disappear, so it stays chashuv. Vechilfei tardin. You have these beet stalks. V'kilchikrov. You have these cabbage stalks. V'dlasivonis. These Greek gourd. All this. The point is, all these stuff are very chashuv. Rabbi Kiva was ma'asif afki karshal abayis. That it's chashuv or arla roila kilikarim kilikarim. Vitmala. What's the kash where I mentioned this? Vitmala Rabbi Yechon Amar es shedarkoi limon is only where it's 100% exclusive. That you would want limon as decanted individually. Shaninu. Shemish lakish ayim kol shedark limon shaninu. Sanich larish lakish. We can understand what's typical. So therefore, it makes sense. Rabbi Yechon, this is the kash ma'ikal amema. You Rabbi Yechon clearly saying these three exclusive. Amar Papa rather nechanami aitano. Tana, we're talking, this Tana is the Tana. Tana, the litra ksiyas. This is talking about the litra ksiyas. What are we talking about the litra? Litra is a shear, is a weight. And a simple level, litra is a mana, it's 100 dinner. But the point is, litra ksiyas is talking about the figs. The Amar as follows. Called Dava sheyesh by minyan. Anything that's the derech to count. For example, there's bundles of litra that most people's akrashi shirab ne'adam ain. Meichrein b'minyan, usually by the liter of ksiyas. You don't, rather we're going to see in a second. You put it, it's almost like your shalmi kogon pictured in my head, somewhat like a circle pot, and you make it, you wake the thing, and you cut it up. Because we're going to see in a moment, exactly you have a suffix where the tamur is on top of the pot, or a kaveris, but the point is on top of the pot. We're going to have a shaila in a moment, a suffix, what do you do in such a case? Because the point is this, I feel the abundant bottle, so kolshkin our sugya. Our sugya is the raisa, and that's the whole point. We're talking about the raisa here by psula carbon, kolshkin the raisa. The Tanya, what's the shaila of litra? A person has a litra ksio shedarsa pi eagle, they need debi is a eagle darsa. So again, I'm picturing more of like a pot. Oh yeah, pi chavis or bal veine debi is a chavis darsa, pi kaveris veine debi is a kaveris darsa. So again, what do you do in such a case, on a simple level? A person has tamura. Now, he put it in one of the pots, one of the barrels, one of the kaveris. He turns around, he sees 10 of them, or 100 of them. I'm going to see it's enough kamina if it needs to be 10 barrels or 100. But he turns around, he looks, he says, "Oy, gaferlach. I put it in one of them, I have no clue which one I put it in." So what do you do over there? It's machlekes. Machlekes, Rameir and Rabbi Yehuda, what is the machlekes of Rabbi Elazar and Yeshua? So Rameir Omer as follows, that the machlekes of Rabbi Elazar and Yeshua says, "Oy, Rabbi Elazar Omer Rainis al Yoinois, Kilohin Prudais, Vatachtarnois, Malois is al Yoinis." What does that mean? On a simple level, where is your suffix? Everyone agrees where you have a barrel, or you have any type of thing, and the point is you only have a suffix on the top. Why? You only put a covering, a frosting. Picture you have a beautiful cake, and you put a nice frosting on top of the cake. Where's your suffix? Only on the top. So what's the shayla? Do we say, now we all know the concept of bittul needs to be like, say, 1 out of 100. So no, I need 100 cakes in order to be just the frosting alone if I count that, and therefore I need 100 cakes. So maybe we look at it, the whole chayfetz b'fnei atzma, it's all mixed, it's all one big shayla. What would be an afkamina? An afkamina is, do I need 10% or 100%? Do I need 10 or just a fraction of it, and therefore I have to have a suffix? So what do you do then? Rabbi Elazar says, "Rainas Yanis Kilain Prudais." And therefore, what do you got to do? You need 100 frostings. Rabbi Scheiner, no. And this is the Afkashitas Rameir. However, Rabbi Yehuda goes extreme. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, even Rabbi Yehuda, Kof. Rabbi Shua doesn't make a difference. So this is why we're bringing this. We're bringing this with Shitas Rabbi Yeshua and Shitas Rabbi Yehuda. It's a little confusing. So you have Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Elazar, Machlekes Rameir, Machlekes Elazar, and Rabbi Yeshua, and it's Machlekes Rameir and Rabbi Yehuda had to understand the Machlekes of Elazar and Rabbi Yeshua. So what? Rabbi Yehuda, so in such a case, Rabbi Yeshua is a fili yisham shalosh mashpum alayalu. So darsa be'igol ve'nir de'bezim malkum be'igol darsa. Oh, let's find another drama. In such a case where it's mamash already mixed up, then divrakol yalu. Everyone agrees where it's not like a frosting, where it's not a top. Everyone agrees. We look at it as one big cake, one big barrel, and the avad will be bought. Rav Ashi Amar Adkat. So on that we're going back to our Mishnah. So what do we want to say? We're trying to say this Tana Litter's crew is going like this shita. Rav Ashi Amar, Filatim Rabbanon, Balei Chaim, Chashivi, you can't compare a sugya. Over here, what are we discussing now, Mishnah? Balei Chaim. Balei Chaim, a Chashiv from the Atzmoi, Veloi, Batli, and therefore Kushtim, and the other sugya is a Kushtim with all the Shitas. There we're discussing Tamura by Litra. Here, what are we discussing? Balei Chaim. Balei Chaim are always Chashuv b'fnei Atzmoi. Now we're going to discuss the halachos of roif. There's a concept of in a chanami, a person has 100. What are we discussing over here? You have 100 pieces. One of them is a suffix. So we're not going to work from the concept of roif. Like we discussed, it's chashivi, it's not batul. However, there's another concept called the parish. What do we say? Meruba parish. In a chanami. We understand that we can't be vatal it. But when we pull it out, we all know once we pull it out of the bundle, what do we say? Where is this from? It's from the roif. And the roif is tahar. So tomorrow, it's not going to help. Nimshach. Have a look kavua. This is a sugya of kavua. The chol kavua is the sugya in Sanhedrin. We're not going to go too extensive into it. But the simple level is when something's a kavua, when you have a suffix and you go var. But the point is, when you go into the suffix and he doesn't move, what do we say? This person has nothing to do with the roif. Rather, he's considered a mechsa. The chol kavua k'mechsa mechsadami, and therefore we're not going to say it's batul. Zok tomorrow and I gimel on the base top of the amud. If so, Allah. Okay, so you have a problem of kavua? Make a move. Allah, we're talking about animals. Nichmashina denied you. Make a move, and then you don't have kavua, and then you have call the parsh, move with the parsh. V'nem call the parsh, move with the parsh. Amarava. Rather gzeira hashdamar. They take it out. But the point is gzeira. You're right. Rather gzeira shama yavo yud kahanim v'vas achas v'yikrivu. Now here the lashon is v'yikrivu. The havim over here we're talking about. Where chayshesh, after you do it, you're going to be makavit. So tomorrow, Megisa Asuri, you're not making sense. The person did a mashicha. And while you did the mashicha, what do you tell me? It's tar. And only later, we're worried all 10 of them are going to have the exact same time. It's going to go back to Isser. It's ready mutter. Once something becomes mutter, you can't go back to an Isser. The Hainu, when you picked it up, called the parsh, move the parsh. So each animal of Ne'atzmai is mutter. Oh, all 10 of them meet up by the Mizbeach for whatever reason. Oh, then it doesn't add up. You never go back to Esther. Rather, you read it. Zok tomorrow. Elo. Rather, Mishom Shema Yavoyud Kahanim Vas Achis V'Yichu. B'Shas Ma'is have taken it. There, everyone agrees that it doesn't make sense to say each one is Meruv of the parish. So we have a Gzer. Zok tomorrow. Baseres Kahanim Vas Achis B'Yefsher. Come on. Is that really shchiach? Is that really even possible? And then Elo Merava in Chanami. It's a Gzera of Mishom Kavua. What? We're worried. It's going to have the person going to do kavua. The chol kavua k'mechsa mechsadami, and it's going to come out. It's taka, not a good carpet. Amar Rava. Hash dami Rabbanon. Rava wants to say a fascinating locha. Now that Rabbani can't do it, hash dami Rabbanon. Lei nakrif. What happens if you are makrivit? Do you get a kapara or not? Ikarv lemiratzi or not? And that ikarv lemiratzi. Rava says for a statement, the halacha is a person does not get what? A person does not get a rotzen, and he has to be makrivit again. He has to give a replacement. You, Rava, telling me that a person is not getting ritzli. We have a Mishnah Kinim. The Mishnah Kinim says as follows: Chatos shenisarva ba'ilo, va'ilo shenisarva b'chatos, afilachas b'ribaya. The halacha is not batul yemusikulat. However, b'mad dvarim amurim b'koyin nimlach. The hainu nimlach means if he would have asked, it's like a lot of people. What do? They apologize instead of asking. It's much easier to apologize. So he did it, and then he said sorry. So he did it without asking. If he would have asked, he would have said not to do it. But Lamaisa, he did it. So it depends. What do we get? We have an oil chatas. We discussed this many times. The chut hasikra, the red line in between, we gave the simanim. By what? Oila means high up. What is a person that's high up? The oif fly. So only the oilas the oif is lamal mechut hasikra, and the exact opposite of the oilas oif. Oila, the exact opposite is chatas. The exact opposite of oif is a behema, so only oilas oif and the chatas behema are lamala. So here we're discussing not chatas behema, we're discussing regular chatas. You have oilas oif. So dafka the oila helps lamala mechut sikra, and the chatas helps only lamata mechut sikra. So in such a case, avokon shenim lachasol lamala mechsa just the oilas kosher mechsa pasul. Lamata just the chatas is kosher mechsa pasul. Achas lamata achas lamala. You're left with nothing. Shnei psula, sheni ayim, the chatas, with krev l'mala, and therefore it's possible for oil krev l'mata. So Dr. Marla, Keman the Amar, Rava, it's Takab Shan and Rava. Rava holds command Amar Balachayim are what? Are Nitchit. And this Mishnah that we're discussing over here, that says over here, it's Kasha command Amar Balachayim a Nitchin, and that's why it works. Mele, it's not a Kasha on Rava. Rava is rather going to say, in such a case, you don't have Ritzah. Why? Because the concept, like we said earlier, that he holds Balachayim and Nitchin. Zok the Gemara, is that really true? Harish Chutin, Dilukula Ama Nitchin, Vitnan. Harish Chutin, Dilukula Ama Nitchin. Utnan, Rabbi Lazar Oimer, in Kol Rav Aroy Shalachem Mehem, Yikervu, Kol Aroshim. So, and clearly, Rabbi Lazar over here clearly says, in such a case, that what? That you could be makavit. So don't tell me Nitchin or not. My answer is no, Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Lazar is Yachar. Rabbi Lazar held like Shita's Chanan Mitzri. Chanan Mitzri said as follows, that what is Chanan Mitzri Shita? Chanan Mitzri Shita is, there's never dichoy. Not even Bala Mechaim. How do we know this? The Hudama Chanan Mitzri, the Tanya on the top of Ayin Dalad Amar Aleph. In a scenario, the Tanya Chanan Mitzri, I feel Dam Bekois. So what are we talking about Dam Bekois? Rashi's Mazah, we're talking about the Sar Nas B'fnim. What is the halacha of the Kohen Gadol? He has the Sar Nas B'fnim, but before he does his Rika, it has to be corresponding the Mishtalech La Zalzal. What happens? The Mishtalech La Zalzal, next thing you know, he has a heart attack. He dies. You got to get him a replacement. However, the Chatas, the Dam that you're holding, is Dichui. Because in order for the Dam to be kosher, you need to have the Sar Mishtalech. And the Sar Mishtalech is dead. You need a replacement. What do you do in such a case? Zok Reb Chanan, the Mitzvah, fascinating Chiddush, no problem. Find a replacement and use the exact same Dam that was holding your hand. So what do you clearly see? Ain't dichoy. Because there was a concept of dichoy. You have to wait till you get a replacement. So Shita Reb Chanan Mitzri, massive Chiddush, he says, I feel a Dam bekois, what? Using the same Dam.
As the one that would have been pussy because of the other that died?
That's the whole Chiddush. The Dam bekois, you're still using the same Dam. Elamai, maybe Chaver, Chaver doesn't mean replace the Dam. Chaver means the Sar HaMishtalech, Umezavik loy, the Isa Kais. So you clearly see, Chanan Mitzri holds, it's never Bechlal a concept of Dichai. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Rav Avu, Amar Rav. We're going to see Shita Rav Nachman by Tabas. We're going to see another Shita later with someone else. We're going to ask, why do we need both? But here we're discussing a Tabas. Tabas, shall avoid this Kechav, the Shail is a Chosh of Tabas, or not a Chosh of Tabas. Simple level, talking about a ring, the what of Avodah Zarah. Shenis Arva B'meya Tabais. So you have 100 beautiful kosher rings. One of them is Avodah Zarah. V'nafla achas mehem liyama gadol. Tosha says very fascinating. Dafka if it fell, but you can't do it. Pretend you can't. Otherwise, we're going to knas you. You can't throw it on purpose in order to be mat to the bundles. Zok Tosha. The dafka nafla memela. Avalapila filu shaygeg. Then katsina on atu mezid. And he even says dafka liyama gadol. Yama gadol we consider it is gone. But if it's somewhere, let's say it fell somewhere under a carpet where you know it's there, you just got to creak to get it. There, it's not going to work. She'ena ba'en. He says, the halacha is hutrakul, and why? You have 99 rings. What do we say? The amrina hachtenafal, the one that fell into the yamagadol was what? Haina disur. Very fascinating chiddush. Eisve Rabbi Rav Nachman, you're telling me that what? Rav Nachman says it fell into the yamagadol, it's not batal. However, tabash Rabbi Chavim got mixed up, it would all be possible. Our Mishnah says, I feel achas b'riboya, even one of 10,000 dikakasha ones in musakulan. Amai, why is that name of the miss? Say that if one of them died, he threw the miss. So Amalei, Rav, the Amakar Belezer, what's Rabbi Lezer? The Tanat. We have this mission, we're going to see this later, Mitzvah it's this week's already. The Tanat, Rabbi Lezer, Oimer, and Karv, this is what we brought earlier on top of the Amid. The Rabbi Lezer says in Karv, Rosh Alachem, Yikru, Kolaroshon, Kula. So he's going clear like shit, Rabbi Lezer, that you could be Makavit. So Dr. Marva, Amar, Rabbi Lezer, not Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Lezer, the Amar, Lahitri, Rabbi Lezer, the Tano. Ela dafka shnaim, where it's only where you have two, where always one of them is 100% kosher. But if it's one, then you can already have a shayla. Dafka shnaim, okay, you're right. I'm also talking about tarti kamina. It's a scenario we have two. In such a case, where one of them is kosher, that's the discussion, and therefore we're going to say a fascinating chiddush that it's mutter. So what do we just say from Nachman? Amar Nachman, Amar Rav. Yehuda Merav, when they bring it down. Amarav, Tabashav, Tzchamish, and Sabbath, Metabois. What is the halacha as follows? You have a bundle, Rav wants to say, or Rav Yehuda, you have a bundle of 100 rings. Now, Uper Shar Boyin Lamakam Echad. So the bundle of 100 rings, we said, Sabbath, they all become possible. Then you go, take this bundle, take 40, which is a meat of the pile, put it pile A. The other 60, put it into pile B. So what is the halacha in such a case? If And then Parsha Achas Marbam. You know what we say about the minor, the smaller pile? Eino Iseres. But if it went in Achas Meshishim, we say the bundle is 60. That's where the treifa is. That's where the Avodah Zarah is. Iseres. So effective Mara. Maishna Achas Marbam. Why is it one from the 1 and the 40? We say the Avodah Zarah is not in there. The light Damrina Yisur Beruba. You say. Where was the Isser? In the bigger pile, in the 60. Achas Meshishim Nami Amrina Yisur Beruba. You say the same thing. When you pull it out, when you take it out, where's the leftovers? 59 is leftover. That's a right out of 60. So why do we say such a case? If you take the 40, you put in a different place, ain't Itzris. But what do we say? Itzris. Why? Because that's where the bundle is. It's Mistam in the right, and therefore it's possible. However, Dr. Yehuda, when I said this halachic, don't compare our sugyas. What are we comparing? We're trying to compare our sugyas. We're under the treifas. It's not really the carbon for what? Leave that alone. Why? So we're going to see that Shmuel holds Bechlal. It's never going to be, even a sveka, it's never possible. He doesn't agree with this halacha. Then we're going to question on Shmuel. Meisvei, you're telling me what? But no matter what, how many svekas you can count, it's always possible. It clearly says sveka mutaris. For example, Ketzad. We all know Kulan Asurin. But Piresh, Echem Man, Ribaya, and Ribaya, it's mutar. Why? Because it's Sveka. Safek, Bechlal, it's from the bundle. In terms of lines from the bundle, Safek is Bechlal, but it's Zara. So tomorrow, you're right. Rather, it's a Machlekes Tanoimi, and Shmuel doesn't have to work with this. The Tani Ridaimer. What is the halacha by Remainim? So we're discussing Remainim. Remainim Badan, Eitzim Bechoshu. Now, the Remainim is not talking about Avodah Zarah. The Remainim, we're talking about a scenario of Arla Truma. Simple level. It's talking about Truma and out of Avodah Zarah. It's very clear. We're going to see in a moment. Eitzim Bechoshu, Ketzad. Nafal Echem Enli Tech Ribaya and Ribaya Asurit. But Reb Shimon Yehuda, Reb Shimon Ribaya Asurit. Umiribaya, then into 3. We're going to see why 3 Avada means 2 with the Asur. Mishlaish into 3 remaining. Mishlaish Magam Echad Mutter. Zok tomorrow. Shmuel Dama Kamat. So who's Shmuel going like? Ikar Yehuda. Not making sense. We're talking about remaining. Remaining means Shari Sur. Remaining is all the Truma. Ikar Yehuda Philip Shari Sur Master. You Shmuel like Dafka same Avodah Zarah. Svek never works. And Ikar Shimon. Shimon's matter by Avodah Chavim. Philip Chavim Namishar. V'chit you're going to tell me Shana Reb Shimon. Even Reb Shimon is a chiluk. Ben Reb Zevachim Shari Sur Melahad the Tanya. Safek Avodah Chavim Masurei. It clearly says when it says in this Baisa. Safek Avodah Chavim Masurei. Svek Materes. You tell me Reb Shimon's mechalik. Then if so, Mani Lo Reb Yehuda Reb Shimon. How's that going to stem? And that my answer is you're right. Lo Ilam Reb Shimon. Avada Brais says Taka Reb Shimon. That's what Taka makes sense. It's Sveka is Mutaris. However, Shmuel, Savar Lava Weir by Avodah Zarah and Chanami, Savar Lakav Yehuda, what's Sveka is never going to work. But Bechada, which is Avodah Zarah, Upala Galera, and he argues by Shari Sur, means does say Sveka does work, Upala Galera, Bechada. Amamar, we just said a moment ago, Miribayel Shleisha Mar, Shleisha Makamecher Mutter. So, in fact, the Mar thought in a second, that 3, you need to have 3 plus 1. So it's up tomorrow when I down on the base. Maishna Shleisha, Dika Ruba, Shnaim, Nami Ika Ruba. My answer is you're right. When I said Gimel, I didn't mean Gimel plus 1. I rather meant 2 plus this equals 3. My Gimel Diktani, Tartivu. We're going back. Rashi's Masber with the Ibasema is going back to earlier, where Shmuel says, Sveka, but it's Cham Aser. Shmuel, which Savala means Shmuel, Savala, Rabbi Lezer, it's a sugyo in Avodah Zarah regarding the wood by an oven. Rashi's Masber the case, then not to Lamena Eitzim, which are also by no. And you were masking the Tanner. The point over there, Rabbi Lezer says, Yolich Hanoah Liyam Melech. The Rabbi Lezer clearly holds Svek over there. We're talking about Avodah Zarah. Sveka, but Avodas Kechavim is Asuras. Amar Ishlakish. Chavashal Truma. A person has a barrel full of Truma. The halach is again Hotru. So we're going to question why do we need Rav Nachman? Rav Nachman said about the tabas of this Chavim. Then we have Rish Lakish by the Chavis of Truma. But the exact same scenario like Rav Nachman. Where did it fall from? The Sur Nafal. Fact Gemara ve'itzlich der Rav Nachman ve'itzlich Rish Lakish. You need the case of Tabas and Avodah Zarah and the case of Chavashal Truma. The Rav Nachman by Tabas having Menachem and Levis Chavan the Elamatirin. You have no choice. Ava truma l'maisi can sell it. The yesh l'matir l'avin the mishlakish amin chavis the minkor and filasa. Everyone can recognize it. Ava tabas l'minkor and filasa. Lo merely need it both. You need truma the chavish truma and the tabas of zara. You need it tzrich. You need it both. Amar Rabba la hitar ishlakish dafik l'chavis the minkor and filasa. Ava teina. So therefore, Rabbi wants to say the Rishlok Taka is going to only say dafka by a chavis. Ava teina, which is not minkor light. Rabbi Yosef no. Rabbi Yosef argues. Rabbi Yosef Amar in shitas Rishlakish afilu teina ken filasa. Just like the nefila is matter, so too the aliyah. Amar Rabbi Lazar, the Amar chavis shel truma shenaflo bekuf chavius. What is the halacha? Peiseach achas mehen b'noitel amena kemei dimua. As long as the cheshbon you need to give him. So what would that be over here by truma or be 101 b'shaitz? Yosef dimu kamala shmeitza, and he understood that he meant if you want, it's like you ever patent. You ever want, just open up the barrels and take out a little. Amalei Rav Nachman, Kama v'shasi k'chazina. And you could just go and gulp and drink. More than that, Rashi's masber the question better. It comes out when chavi is stumas, you can never have an issue of bittul. Why? You could just go and open it up, and therefore you'll be matul. So how could you ever have chavis? We learned earlier the chavi stumas loy batul as one of the 6 stuff. But lefi there's cheshbon like Rashi, you could always open it up and make a batul. It's only the ever niftachas man, not till many can do. But Shaisa, but avad it's also like a tchila to go do it. Amar by Shiur. Chavis shel truma shenesaber 150 chavius and v'niftachu 100 mehen. Not till many can make the more b'shaisa. What about the other 50? B'shar asur ashiv t'chula. Because why? Ashiv t'chula imrina super rabbi isay. Don't think, oh, no big deal. Let's go open the 100 and then you can have automatically the other 50. It's kasha. Rather we don't say that. Okay, very good shmat. Our Mishnah told us a reveya v'hanirva. More than that, we're not focusing on the reveya and nirva. The Mishnah over here in the Gemara, we're focusing that the Mishnah tells us a reveya v'hanirva is also. And the last case was kalayim b'chulei utreifa. That was the Mishnah in Ayin Aleph from the base, the top. It said the scenario of treifa. So right away, the Gemara is going to question as follows. Let's say a case of reveya. Everyone agrees that reveya, there's no real hecker on the animal. So therefore, we understand that you're getting confused. Zok the Gemara. Go figure out, go pick out from the bundle. How did he know that it got mixed up? So I was very bothered by this. I still have a tzarech beer or something that, why don't we have a simple case? We're talking about a case where you know it's a treifa that's not goli. The doctors, you did a mumcha, we're going to see how you figured it out. And you put it in room Aleph. You went to the restroom, you come back, where's the animal? With all the hundreds of thousands of animals in room base. So that's how you know it got confused. It sounds like in the Gemara. How did you know it got mixed up? Avada, you knew that there's no siman, but you separated from the pack, and then it fell into the pack for whatever reason. I'm not sure why we don't have that. Sounds like it's a double pasha for the Gemara that such a case is not considered the taruvas. It's not the sug of taruvas. So the Gemara, because we're been ever. If we're talking about a treifa that you're not sure, so some treifas it's missing a leg, it's pashut, and some treifas, for example, puncture in the lung, you can't really see it. So we're going to see 3 sheetas. We're going to have Rabbi Yanai, Rish Lakish, and Rabbi Yirmiyah. Rabbi Yanai says we're talking about a certain type. We're talking about a thorn. Now he's thinking that a kite of Ada is not a treifa. A ze'ev is a treifa. And the Hamini is, or not even the Hamini, he holds that there's no difference. Rish Lakish, the Arab and the Fula, we're talking about the Nefel. Nefula, Nami Lutbetka, because some no, I'm the Tricham Eis. You have to wait 24 hours, you didn't end up doing it, you shechted it. And Halcha Tricham B'dika. Rav Yirmiyah in the Arab Vlad treifa, so there's no semen. And the Gemara is masber. Why did Rabbi Yanai, Rish Lakish, Rabbi Yirmiyah each have three different hezber? Zok the Gemara, because the other sheetas didn't hold like whatever the other sheetas said. The Hainu, Rabbi Zok the Gemara. Kulu Rabbi Yanai. Everyone agrees that why did they have to come on Rish Lakish or Rabbi Yirmiyah? Kulu Rabbi Yanai Amri. Why? Because Ben Kuvitz Eitz, Lidus Zev made the idea. They held high mashich. Let's be real. By the sugya of a zev, if how is the picture? How's the thorn? It's not a thorn like which is egel, which is around. Rather, it's more elongated. It's more like a rectangle. High mashich. The high by the kites is egel. Kirsh Lakish Lam Kisavam the inner tzichem is lace and halcha in tzichem dika. Rabbi Yirmiyah Amri. Because why? Because they're going. Rabbi Yirmiyah is going like a v'lat. Whose sheet is that? Rabbi Lezer. Rabbi Lezer like mukmi. We don't want to go like a yachid. Kachim min b'mina v'chulei. Okay, very nice. You have kachim b'kachim. where a person, what is the kohen going to do? He says, okay, this carbon should be for Reuven. This carbon's going to be the Shimon's going to work. Fact, the more simple question. The Bais Micha, the Bailam don't know who the Bailam are. So who's going to do the smicha? Amir Rav Yosef. We're talking about echanami v'karban anoshim are not toned smicha. So tomorrow is that really true? We're talking about only karban anoshim, but karban anoshim like Eisra Ba'aya karban yachid shenisar b'karban yachid. A person has a karban yachid that got mixed up, or a karban sibur shenisar b'karban sibur, or a karban yachid v'karban sibur. For example, Rashi says the sari nasi on the top of Ainayim and out the sari nasi got mixed up with the sari galim by oila sitzibur and oila siyachid, or a karban sibur shenisar b'zebazeh. So what do you do in such a case? Noisin dalam metonis mikol echad ve'echad. So again, we have a machlekes actually b'cham beisil lamedvav and beis. We're going like shittas beisil over here. Shittas beisil held that by echatos it's good enough one matana. We saw shittas b'sham. It says you need both. But here clearly see we pass like beisil. So it says noisin dalam metonis mikol echad ve'echad. V'im nasa matana achas. Who's the shittas? Shittas beisil mikol echad yaitz. V'im nasa, however, avram mikulan yaitz. However, what you're going to see, dafka doesn't mean mechayim. I'm going to see it means doim l'chayim. Amad v'um shenisar b'chayim. Avon nisar b'shchutin noisar ba matanis b'kulon v'nasa matanachas b'kulon yaitz. And Rabbi says, Rabbi I'm in depends. Reis matanik im yesh b'kadil azeh b'kadil azeh. We're going to see it means the simon on both sides. That's the sheir of imla psula. What's the kasha? Ktani yachad dum the tzibur. And ma tzibur. Where do you get the tzibur? Where do you get the karbanos from? You get the karbanos from what? Machzor shekel. Who gets the machzor shekel? The men. Matzib is Gabri, so to have Yachid is Gabri. Amarava, V'tizbur Ahmed Tarstri. Can you read the Brisa the way you're reading it? Just Kipshutai. That doesn't add up. Why not? The Ktani, it says in the Brisa, Ma'advarmum, Kishinisarvu Chayin, Avanisarvu Shchutin, once a Shechteloi. Saktamar, Mali Chayin, Mali Shchutin. What is the difference if a Shechter or not? Which means to say is, just like Bechayim, it's two separate animals, so to over here means in the kaises, it's two separate kaises. When you have one cup with mixed up, full of dam, of other kabbanas, nice and dalad matanas l'kulon, v'imnasa matana achas l'kulon yotzet. So what are we talking about this Bryce? So what's the answer? The Bryce is Bechlan, not talking about Chayim. If we're not talking about Chayim, what are we talking about? Nothing to do with smicha. The whole kasha is, how could you tell me? The smicha, the problem was, we're talking about Bais smicha. We said, we're talking about karban anoshim. We have this whole brayso where clearly we understood him at Chaim, so it's ton smicha. Element smicha wasn't an issue. And then we answer Mechlal, we're talking about a brayso where the animals are Bechlal, Mesim, and Truta just means Ka'en Chaim, that it's two separate cases. Rabbi Aimer, what did we say? It needs to have a shear. Right? It's like shear of him, lav. Psula. Zok tomorrow, me is the Rabbi Haisvar, Vatanya, Rabbi, Ledevrei, Rabbi Leaza, what is the sheep of Rabbi Leaza? Zah, Kol Shuhu, one ein him and base, Kol Shuhu Mataris. What are we talking about in a scenario? We're talking about by the Mechatos, by the Paradum. What is the halacha by the Mechatos? It needs to be with spring water. You can't mix the L'chayra with regular water. So it needs to be beautiful spring water. And what is it over there? It says the Devrei, Rabbi Leaza, where it talks about Hazah, Kol Shuhu Mataris, that it's good enough Hazah, it doesn't need any shear. V'azah and it's rechashir, and it says hazah mechza. Rashi says avad mechza is lav dafka. There's no shear. Hazah mechza kosher mechza pasul. So what do we clearly see in such a case? That there's no, and again the hamina is just like over there by the hazah by the mitzvah. So too hazah by the paraduma would have the exact same thing over here by matan domin that they both don't need a shear. Now the Moran says ledvar of Rabbi Lazar. You Rabbi when it says I'm a Rabbi, it's ledevrei. Rabbi Lazar, the Rabbi Lazar come up himself, Rabbi Avada would hold in Echnami, even by Hazah, by Mechatos, there's a shear. Don't compare Hazah by Mechatos. It's very possible Hazah agrees to Rabbi Lazar, there's no shear Rabbi Lazar. However, by Matan Domim, he will say there is a shear. Nisarvu, the Mishnah tells us, Bechar, B'maisi v'chul. Amar Mechama Bechar, Le Beis Shammai. Now Beis Shammai, it's Machlekes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel regarding a Bechar. Beis Hillel holds by Bechar, by Balmo, anyone can eat it, even a person that's fully tummy. However, Beis Shammai says if a person tummy from his bodily emissions, for example, a zava, nida v'chulei, it's considered tummy and it's asr. So Bechar Beis Shammai, ein machin l'nidus. Beis Hillel holds, Beis Shammai holds not. The shaila is Tmura Samau. Another halacha is Bechar and Nifta. Tmura Samau and Bechar in a nishka belitra. Tmura Samau. Again, it's a bizayin for the Bechar. It's a bizayin for the meat of kacha Bechar to do a litra. Litra was like a weight weighted very heavy, weighted them up, man, dinner. But the point is, when you did it on a liter, Rashi says, we're going to see the Gemara later, you got 100% of the value. It was a very good weights, and therefore it's kedai to do with the liter, and that's why we're going to have it such a shiloh. But avada b'bechar, you don't do with the liter. It's murasim out. Tani b'char meiser, mishahum, once it comes from home, oitzin tmura, v'tmurasan, kayetz b'hem, therefore it would have the exact same halachas. Boi ram b'chama, hitvis b'char, lebedek habayis. Now, what did he do? He put the b'char on the bedek habayis mount. Do we say, maybe over there, she yishka b'litra. Since over here, he's not going to get it. Usually by b'char, who gets the hana? The kohen. But he gave it to the Bais Medrash, to the bedek habayis. Do we say me? She yishka b'litra the hekdesh adif. Yes, it's a bezayin, but we're going to make more money for it. That was the list of b'char adif. Amar yis b'zid tashma. Nisar b'char ma'isa. What does the Mishnah say? You're a voshis tavu. V'yaychlu k'b'char ma'isa. Lav l'meimer. They yishka b'litra. Hagam ravacha the hekdesh. And that the Gemara says Ravuna Ravuna Ravachizket. Amid Raviyam mi dami hasam shkoyach. What are we talking about? Our Mishnah shtei kedushais b'shnei gufin. Hacha. In this scenario, we're talking about shtei kedushais, where a person put on the bedek habayis the b'char, the guf echad. Maybe in such a case, we could say, since a ravach of a hekdesh for the Bais Hamikdash, it's kedai to do it. Maskif lo Rabbi Yisrael Rabin ma ilu amar hiftuli. What would it be if the guy says redeem b'chashit b'us bedek habayis? Klom shayim loy. Would you listen to that? For the mar shkayach hivdu hivdu's a daraisa. Hivdu achman amalei siftel. Ami klom hiknezel mashakanaloi. The only schusim you given to the bedek habayis is your own schusim. Now in your own schusim, you can do the literal because it's a b'zayin. So to the bedek habayis, it's not going to help. Hakol yichayil l'sar v'chule. We said chutz from chatas asham. So zok the mar ma'ishna chatas asham. Why? The high asham is from what the zachar. Hey, chatas is from the keva. The high zachar and the keva. Chatas v'ayla. You have the same thing. Chatas is in the keva. Ayla is a zachar nami. The mar answers no. Ikasar nasi. You have a problem. The seir is a zachar. That's the point. Seir nasi, which is a chatas and it's a zachar. Zok the mar, if so, they bring them from the goyis. Hiyachi chatas v'asham nami should be mixed up. So mar answers no. There's a chilik. High by the sa'ir, high se'ar, it's hairy. The high by the asham, it's made out of wool, so this is simon. High tzemer. So the Gemara pesel asham nami lamar. High ben shanav, high ben shtei shanav. There's a difference between a year and 2 years. Like tomorrow, no. Ika asham nazir va'asham etzayir, that they're both within the first year. Be the same, which is the geshmak teretz. Ika ben shana the mechzik ben shtayim. Ika ben shtayim the mechzik ben shana. Year 2, not necessarily you're going to tell the difference. Zok the heilige mishnah. The final daf. Asham shenis arev b'shlamim. Now we all know there's halachas of shlamim and kachik tashim. We saw this. There's many kulis by shlamim. Shlamim, the Torah gives us an extra day. Basically, you have Sunday night, and Monday. Get an extra time. Then a kachik tashim. Now what happens? He got mixed up. Now we all know where do you shech the kachik tashim? The asham needs to be shechted in the safan. The shlamim can be shechted anywhere. So zok demar, and there's another halacha that also regarding. That Zok Gemara, there's also another halacha of regarding who could eat it. That the dafka, the zichri kahuna could eat it by asham, and the kachik asham dafka zichri kahuna, and the zara, and you only have a yom and a So what happens? You have asham shenisar b'shlam. Do you go lakula? You go lachumra. So B'Shem and Aimer, shnei yishchatu b'tzafan like the asham, even the shlamim, because you're not sure it's a suffix. V'yaychlu k'chamish b'hen. Rashi says dafka the schar, dafka the zara. You only get 1 day a night. Amruloi chachamim said no. You're better off not being makravit. Why? Because you're going to end up causing it. Rashi's masber, it's very possible, by you minimizing the time from 2 days to 1 day, you could cause it to become nicer. So you're better off no risk. Rather, what should you do? Nice. What? Nicer. Could be muveili day nicer. We're talking about the shlamim. Again, you have the shlamim and you have the asham. Asham is what's the limit? 1 day. What's the limit of? Shlamim. By you being makravit, what are you giving at the chumrah? You're giving it the chumrah of asham. What happens if you mess up and you wait an extra day by mistake? You made it the halach of an asham. What is the halach of an asham? It's that leftover day has a halach of a nicer. So you're better off you row achi stuff. Since it has the takana. Nisarvu, however, nisarvu chatichas bechatichas. This happened much later on. The kachim b'kachikalim. So, or anachalim echad b'nachalim shnei. For example, a toida and a shlamim. Toida only has 1 day. And Rashi says, "Baha Rabbana Maidu." Here you don't have the takana of your Rashi stavus. You have no choice. Zok Gemara Tani Tanaka made the rap. Shvius. Now also Shvius, there's a chumrah of Tmura. Tmura could eat it forever. Shvius, you can only eat it until you have it till it has in the fields. Once it's necking by the fields, there's nothing in the fields anymore. You got to burn it by Shvius. So Tani Tana come in the Rabbi Shvius, Ein Leichin B'Demei Truma. Why? Nei Shemat Mechilasa. Because again, you give it in the shin instead of the Olam. Shvius eventually is this bar by Olam once you have by the field. Once it's not by the fields anymore. I'm Rabbi to come in the Rabbi. Ha, the like Rab Shimon, the Rab Shimon. What did he say? For example, on our Mishnah, Mivin Kachin on the base of Psol. Amalu, no, I feel the Rab Shimon Hanimili Shkayach. It's only the Yaved. Well, look at Chila. Why did not look at Chila? So tomorrow is that really true? Look at Chila. Yesa Abayo. When I involve him out the father that for Kulon, Rashoy and Kaya Kulon. Rashoy Kanim Lashanis Bechilason. Lachlan whether it's Sluin roasted Shluk and overcooked the Mushal. Velosis Lesaychan. Very crucial over here. It says Tavle Chulin. They Tavle Truma. Even though the Tivle Truma, the spicy Truma, what are you doing by putting it in? You be Maitit, the Rabbi Shmuel. You're talking about the Tavlin and Tmura. Hanach the Trumas Tavlin, it's only the Rabban. Again, Vait Esa by the Rava, a Leichin, Trumas Bekasa Meiser, why? Again, same halacha. Meiser could only eat in, your limiting could only eat in where? In your Shalayim. Neshamait Bachilasa. Now you only have your Shalayim. Reb Shimon, however, Reb Shimon matter. So Ishtikli was quiet. So you clearly see Reb Shimon's not bothered with this. However, when a Abai comes to Rabbi Yosef, Galsik with Rabbi Yosef, you could have asked him better. We had a Mishnah that says as follows. Mishnah Shia says, "Ein mevashlin yerek shel shvius b'shemen." Shemen, the hamin is not shemen's eyes. Shemen, canola oil, other oils. It says, "Ein yerek shel shvius." So shvius is not the problem. The shvius is shvius is the problem. B'shemen shel tmura. And we're talking about truma. By default, you're going to ruin the shemen. You're going to make the halach of shemen have shvius, and therefore you're machmer. Shalevi kachim b'sipsul. Reb Shimon matter. So why don't you ask him there? And I already asked you from Tavlin. And what did he answer by Tavlin? It's the Rabbanon. So here we're understanding Shemen is talking about canola oil, which is only the Rabbanon. If that's really true, we're talking about Yerek. Why do you say the case is Yerek shel shvius and the Shemen is Tmura? Say the other way around. Yerek shel Truma. Everyone agrees that Yerek is a Darbanon. So say the case of Yerek, the Shemen shel shvius, and even say Shemen Zayas. So tomorrow, so Abai tells him, the matter of Shemen V'amali, what did he answer? The Arif. Hachinami, I'll tell you, the case is by Yerek, the Arif. So tomorrow, if that's really true, the Arif might tell my Rabbanan, what's Takim Shed Rabbanan asked it. So tomorrow, Midi Dahava Shlomim, Asham Ashlam. So tomorrow. And then he tells Rabbi Yosef, "Mi dabi hasam shkoyach." It's like the kantabira, like we saw in the ratio of the Mishnah over there. Let's let the kantabira. So tomorrow, like dami, you're right. The chaticha shabaticha, can let's let the kanta teichel kacham shabbat. Nasko avina mi dami chaticha shabaticha, let's let the kanta klal. However, we understand the high islate the kanta b'schita by squeezing out oil. Rabbi Yosef is going to say, now come on, let's be real. Hechin ischait. Nitzcha tuva kamasid. You can end up ruining everything. Nitzcha tuva kamasid. B'shvius. Nitzcha porta. Do a little side. You're not helping. You're Ruven Marv. Again, Zoktamar Baite Isvei Abayo. Another kashan Rava. Reb Shimon Aimer Lemachras. Maybe Hashem V'Lugoyim. We're talking about a person who has a suffix in the Mitzvah. Usually about Mitzvah, what is it on the 8th day? You got to bring a carbon. He brings the carbon. He's Hashem, and he also brings the light with him. And he says as follows: I don't know if I'm Mitzayir. So if I'm Mitzayir, but if I'm not a Mitzayir, enough I involve in Bais, what should I do? Should only be and very clearly, and what is he saying? Umatan behind us mismicha nesachim betunav chazav shayik v'nechol. This is the kasha. Clearly, see v'nechol liyayin v'layla. See the katchilot. Reb Shimon is not there to do such a case. What are we talking about over here? We're talking about a mitzayra. He's stuck. He doesn't know what he is. Ateinach leave the gav tekuni gavashani. Okay. Ateinach asham. We can all solve the whole concept regarding the asham. You have a problem. However, you have a problem of the loig. Loig, ma'ikal ameim elamaisov. The loig, if you're talking about a mitzvah, what are you doing? You're bringing chulin into the azara. So tomorrow, the amal loig zeh yein adava. A person, if he wants, it's coming from the psukim. A person, if he wants, he can be menad. If he says, if I'm not a mitzvah, it's going to be an adava. We find by the mincha he can bring a shem of neatzma. Zok tomorrow, mitzvah. However, there's a problem when a person's misnad of shem and if he's not a mitzvah, he has to do kmitza or buy mekamitz. It's talking about the sukkah. We know this is the Karban Mincha, just like the Karban Mincha has kmitza. Who the Shemen has kmitza. There's a big shayla, exactly with the Shemen. How do you do the kmitza? But the point is he has to do kmitza. So the makmitz. He's careful, so he gives also a kaimitz. The Delma Mitzvah body mat and Sheva. You have another problem. But the like Mitzvah, you need to do the Sheva Zois. The Gemara Diyav. More answers, but if you keep it sprinkling, it's like by Pesach by Nacht with your pinky, you have to refill. The most important matter, you do a refill. The Tanan, what should you do in the scenario we're talking about? Where you put on the left kohen's hand, that's how you do it. You refill it. So Lamaisa, it's very possible it's in a dove and you have to burn it. The Aktale. So tomorrow, okay, you're telling me you were makter it? When? Amos. If you tell me you take it, because in order to do the process, you might have been a Mitzayah, so you did the Matana Sheva. You did the Matana Sheva, you're stuck. What is the halacha of the Shem and Shirayim? Havelu Shirayim. Shechasru, ben kmitz laktarve, maktir nesakam mitzalem. So it can be after the Matana Sheva. Ikai the Matana Sheva. That's not going to either work. Call Shimon and Elishim. I read about the Taktir. I'm reviewed the bread of Shimon, but Pazi, you know what you did it for? The Masik Lahu L'Shem eats him. Such a case that works. The Tanya B'Lazaymer, it says in the Pasuk, L'Reich Nichayach. You mamish make it like eats him or mine. They really change it. Rasi says Avada doesn't mean Lishna. The eats him, you do it L'Shem. You're going to do it L'Shem. Eats him, it doesn't mean eats him. Avada means even Mayim. And you say as follows: Avada just going to be like water. L'Reich Nichayach Yetamala Dafka for carbon. But if you want, you could have it in your head. Avalamat L'Shem eats him. And Avada doesn't mean Eitzim, it could also mean Lashon of Mayim, and therefore it's not going to be a problem. Yetz Hashem, we're going to pick up, you're going to have issues with Shirai.